I had been with Sloan and Amp Carter Consulting for almost 20 years when the promotion opportunity came up, Vice President of Operations. It was the role I had been working toward since my first day as an operations analyst, back when our office still used paper ledgers and the fax machine was our lifeline. I had been part of every major transformation this company underwent: the digital overhaul in 2009, the supply chain crisis of 2014, the strategic pivot into renewable energy in 2018. My fingerprints were on the company's very DNA. People knew me as steady, methodical, and unflappable. I wasn't flashy like some of the younger hires, but when executives needed a fire put out, they called me. I had handled vendor disputes that could have cost us millions, renegotiated contracts on impossible deadlines, and built cross-departmental systems that kept the company running smoothly. If you want it done right, give it to Alan, they'd say. I wasn't naive. I knew the company had been leaning toward younger leadership in recent years. They wanted fresh perspectives, as they called it, which usually meant people who could talk in buzzwords and make colorful PowerPoint slides. But I believed, perhaps foolishly, that experience still counted for something. I was wrong. It was a Wednesday afternoon when HR asked me to meet with Mark Radcliffe, the CEO. I walked in expecting the conversation we had rehearsed in my mind 100 times. "Congratulations, Alan. This promotion is long overdue." Instead, Mark's expression was careful, his tone rehearsed. "Alan, we appreciate everything you've done for the company," he said, "but after careful consideration, we've decided to promote someone who can bring new energy to the role." That someone turned out to be Ryan Mitchell, 32, ambitious, loud, and barely 3 years into his career. He had been my direct report not long ago. I trained him. I taught him how to interpret quarterly risk assessments, how to read between the lines of supplier contracts, how to lead without panicking under pressure. And now, he was my boss. I forced a smile that felt like it might shatter my face. "Congratulations," I managed to say. I don't remember the rest of the meeting. My ears were ringing, and my chest felt like it had been caved in. That night, I sat in my car for over an hour in the office parking lot, staring at the building I had given 2 decades of my life to. I told myself it was just a setback. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. They hadn't just denied me a promotion. They had told me, without saying the words, that I didn't belong in the future of this company. And that was a truth I couldn't ignore. The days that followed felt surreal. I'd spent years mentoring Ryan, showing him how to navigate the labyrinth of operations management, and now I was expected to report to him. At first, I told myself it was fine. I would take the high road. I would keep my head down, do my job, and prove to them that they'd made a mistake. But optimism doesn't last long when reality keeps punching you in the gut. The first leadership meeting with Ryan as VP was a turning point. He walked in with that confident swagger I had once admired when he was just a junior analyst. "All right, team," he said, his voice booming like a motivational speaker at a TED Talk. "We're going to modernize operations. Alan, I'll need you to draft a new vendor rotation model. Think cutting edge, not legacy thinking." Got it? Legacy thinking. I felt my face burn, but I said nothing. The room chuckled politely at his fresh energy, but I saw the look on a few of the older managers' faces. They felt it too, the sting of being dismissed without being directly insulted. I had never been a man of ego, but that meeting cracked something in me. It only got worse. He began restructuring, which meant stripping me of the authority I'd earned and handing my responsibilities to younger staff. He reassigned my key accounts. He called my reporting style outdated. He started leaving me out of meetings I had once led. My workdays became an endless stream of menial tasks, while he made flashy presentations with ideas I had quietly implemented years ago. But the true betrayal came when I discovered what he had done with my proposal. Months before the promotion decision, I had developed a detailed strategy for optimizing our procurement process, a system that would save millions by leveraging data analytics to forecast vendor performance. I had presented it to Mark and the other executives in a private strategy session. They praised it, told me it needed refinement, but it could be transformative. It was my work, my brainchild. And yet, at a quarterly meeting, there was Ryan on stage, presenting my proposal, my numbers, my projections, even my phrasing, as his vision for the future of operations. He didn't mention me once. The applause he received felt like nails hammered into my skin. I confronted him privately after the meeting. "That was my proposal," I said, my voice calm but shaking with a quiet rage I rarely allowed myself to feel. He smiled that politician's smile. "Come on, Alan. You know it was a team effort. And I'm just putting it into action. That's leadership. No, I said. That's theft. His expression hardened. Careful, Alan. You don't want to sound bitter. This company values collaboration. But if you can't adapt... He let the threat hang in the air like smoke. That night, I couldn't sleep. My wife found me at the kitchen table at 3 a.m., staring at spreadsheets I couldn't bring myself to close. You're killing yourself for people who don't care about you, she said. And she was right. I had built this company's backbone, and now I was being treated like a relic, a placeholder, until they could find an excuse to push me out. The final straw came 3 weeks later. I received an email from HR. We are re-evaluating your position in light of organizational changes. Please meet with us Monday to discuss your future with the company. That was it. No appreciation, no recognition of my contributions. Just a cold, clinical warning that they were ready to discard me. When I walked into that HR meeting, I wasn't nervous. I wasn't even angry. I was done. Alan, they said, we value your experience, but as the company evolves, we need roles that align with our long-term vision. We'd like to offer you an early retirement package. Early retirement. I was 55. I had no plans to retire. I signed the papers, shook their hands, and walked out of the building for the last time without saying goodbye. In their eyes, I was finished. But as I sat in my car, staring at that building, a new thought burned through the despair. If they didn't value me, I would build something that proved my worth. And one day, they'd have no choice but to see me differently. I spent the first week after leaving Sloan and Amp, Carter in a haze, moving between my home office and the kitchen like a ghost. My days were filled with empty gestures, browsing job listings, writing half-hearted emails to old contacts, staring at my resume like it was an obituary. 55 isn't an age where companies are fighting to bring you on board, and I wasn't interested in taking another mid-level job just to keep the lights on. One evening, as I sat in the backyard with a notebook, my wife came out and put a cup of coffee in front of me. You're too good to let them define you, she said. You've been solving other people's problems for decades. Maybe it's time you solved your own. That stuck with me. I started thinking about what I'd actually built at Sloan and Amp Carter. It wasn't just projects or proposals. I had decades of insight into operational systems, supply chain optimization, vendor negotiations, crisis management. I had rescued multi-million-dollar contracts from the brink. I had turned chaos into order. These weren't just job skills. They were marketable assets. If they saw me as obsolete, maybe I needed to prove I wasn't. I spent weeks doing what I did best, analyzing. I reviewed industry reports, dissected market gaps, and reconnected with old colleagues, many of whom were quietly dissatisfied at their companies. I listened to their problems, and I kept hearing the same thing. Mid-sized firms couldn't compete with the operational efficiency of industry giants. They lacked strategy. They needed guidance. That was my opening. I decided to create something new, an independent consulting firm focused on operations and procurement optimization for mid-sized companies. Not just generic consulting, but real, hands-on restructuring to cut costs and increase efficiency. A service too expensive for big firms to provide at scale, but too critical for smaller firms to ignore. The idea electrified me. I cashed out a portion of my 401k and refinanced a rental property I had kept for years. Risky? Absolutely. But it gave me seed capital. I built a brand, Gray Line Strategies, a name that represented navigating the gray areas of complex business operations. I designed a simple but professional website and drafted a value proposition that spoke to CFOs and COOs directly. We don't just consult. We rebuild your operational core. Then came the outreach. I called former colleagues, old vendors, even competitors I had once negotiated against. I wasn't too proud to ask for introductions. Some doors slammed shut, but others opened wider than I expected. If you're running this thing, Alan, one ex-client told me, sign me up for a meeting. I trust you. By the third month, I had my first big client, a regional manufacturing firm hemorrhaging money from a broken procurement system. They needed help. I spent sleepless nights reviewing their contracts, mapping their processes, and rebuilding their vendor strategy from the ground up. Within 6 months, I saved them $4.2 million. That was the turning point. Word spread. 1 client became 3. 3 became 8. By the end of the year, Gray Line Strategies was grossing more than I had ever made at Sloan and Amp Carter. And unlike my old job, every decision was mine. Every win belonged to me. But even as my business grew, a thought kept gnawing at me. Sloan and Amp. Carter. The company that had dismissed me as too old, too outdated. The company that had handed my life's work to someone else. And then, one evening as I reviewed a quarterly report for one of my new clients, I noticed something curious. Sloan and Amp. Carter was struggling. Their operational efficiency scores had plummeted. Their supplier retention rates were dismal. Ryan's vision wasn't working. That's when my strategy crystallized. I wasn't just going to succeed, I was going to outgrow them. And when the time was right, I wouldn't just compete with them. I would own a piece of them. The moment I realized Sloan and Amp Carter was faltering, my mindset shifted. This wasn't just about building a successful consulting firm anymore. It was about leveraging my growth to reclaim what had been taken from me and proving beyond any doubt that they had been wrong to cast me aside. I started by quietly gathering information. Through my network, I learned that Sloan and Amp Carter's modernization efforts under Ryan were bleeding cash. He'd streamlined departments without understanding their interdependence, replaced experienced managers with flashy hires who couldn't handle complex vendor negotiations, and overextended the company with tech investments that lacked proper ROI analysis. It was chaos masquerading as innovation. I needed leverage. I began targeting their mid-sized clients, companies I had once helped retain when I was at Sloan and Amp, Carter. My pitch was simple. You don't need a bloated consulting firm. You need someone who knows how to fix problems at the root. Someone who has done it for firms just like yours. It worked. Within months, several of their long-term clients had quietly switched to Grayline. My firm expanded. I brought in 2 senior consultants, people I trusted, people who understood that real operations work wasn't about gimmicks, but about results. We built proprietary analytics tools that allowed us to model cost-saving scenarios with surgical precision. Clients loved that we could show them not just what to do, but exactly how much they would save by doing it. Meanwhile, I kept tabs on Sloan and Amp Carter. Their stock price was down, employee turnover was up. The executive team had begun infighting, and from what I heard through the grapevine, Mark Ratcliffe wasn't thrilled with Ryan's vision anymore. That was when I made my boldest move yet. I approached one of Sloan and Amp, Carter's board members, a man named Robert Ames, whom I had helped secure a multi-million-dollar distribution deal years ago. Robert, I said over lunch, I hear things are turbulent over there. If Sloan and Amp Carter is looking for stability, I might have a solution. He leaned back, curious. And what's that? I want to buy in. He blinked. Buy in? Yes, I said. I want equity. I want a seat at the table. I've built a firm that's outperforming Sloan and Amp Carter in key segments, and I have the experience your current leadership team lacks. It's a win-win. You get capital, operational expertise, and an ally who can help stabilize the ship. Robert didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. He said, send me a proposal. I spent the next week building a pitch that wasn't just compelling, it was irrefutable. I laid out Sloan and Amp, Carter's decline in hard numbers, contrasting it with Grayline's growth. I highlighted my operational blueprint, showing exactly how I could reverse their losses within 18 months. And I made it clear that if they didn't partner with me, I would continue expanding and take more of their clients in the process. It wasn't a threat. It was reality. The board deliberated for weeks. In the meantime, I doubled down on growing Grayline. We secured 2 national contracts, bringing in revenues that made me more confident than ever. Then, on a Friday afternoon, Robert called. The board is willing to consider your proposal, he said, but they'll want you to meet with Mark and the executive team. I felt my pulse quicken. This was it. The meeting was set for the following Wednesday in Sloan and Amp, Carter's executive conference room, the same room where I had once been told I was too old for leadership. Walking in that day, I didn't feel like an ex-employee begging for a seat at the table. I felt like a man who owned his future. Mark Radcliffe was there, his smile polite but strained. Ryan sat at the end of the table, arms crossed, his face a mask of irritation. So, Mark said, you want to partner with us? No, I replied, my voice steady. I want to invest in you, and I want to help fix what's broken. Ryan scoffed. You think you can fix this company? I looked him dead in the eye. I know I can. For 2 hours, I walked them through my plan. I didn't hold back. I identified their failures with surgical precision, offering solutions backed by data and decades of experience. I could see the shift in the room. Mark leaning forward, the board members nodding, even the skeptical faces softening as the logic sank in. By the time I finished, Mark said quietly, "We'll discuss terms." As I walked out of that building, I knew the tide had turned. I had gone from being the man they discarded to the man they needed. And I wasn't finished yet. The negotiations dragged on for weeks. Every clause, every percentage point, every voting right was a battle. I wasn't just buying a symbolic stake in Sloan and Amp Carter. I was securing real influence. They wanted my capital and expertise, but they weren't eager to give me power. I pushed back on every attempt to sideline me. If I was coming in, I was coming in as a partner, not a token investor. Eventually, we reached an agreement. Grayline Strategies would acquire a 17% stake in Sloan and Amp. Carter and I would take an official seat on the board. It wasn't a controlling share, but it was enough to shape the company's direction. More importantly, it made me one of their owners. When the deal was finalized, I sat in my office, staring at the signed documents, and let the weight of it wash over me. A year ago, they had tried to package me out with an early retirement. Now I owned part of them. But there was one final reckoning that had to happen. The first board meeting after the acquisition was my chance. I wore a charcoal gray suit, the same one I had worn the day they denied me that promotion. As I walked into the room, the air was different. This wasn't me returning as a disgraced ex-employee. This was me walking in as a peer, no, as their equal. Mark Radcliffe greeted me with his usual performative warmth. Ryan, on the other hand, couldn't hide his contempt. His jaw tightened when I took my seat at the table, directly across from him. "Let's get started," Mark said, trying to maintain control of the room. But I didn't wait for their agenda. "Before we dive in," I said, my voice even, "I'd like to address the elephant in the room." All eyes turned to me. Over the last year, this company has lost major clients, underperformed in operations efficiency, and seen its reputation suffer. I know why, because I helped build what used to work here, and I know exactly what went wrong when it was dismantled. I paused, letting the words settle. We don't need flashy ideas or empty modernization. We need functional systems, real leadership, and accountability. Ryan cut in, his voice sharp. "Are you implying—" "I'm not implying," I interrupted, locking eyes with him. "I'm stating it plainly. You've mismanaged this company." The room went still. Mark shifted uncomfortably, but he didn't stop me. I continued, pulling up the deck I had prepared, detailed data showing the operational decline since Ryan's promotion, comparisons with industry standards, and a recovery plan that could reverse the damage within 18 months. As I spoke, I watched the board members' expressions change, skepticism giving way to something else. Recognition, relief. They knew I was right. When I finished, Robert Ames spoke first. "I think we need to vote on whether to implement Mr. Grant's plan." Ryan sputtered, "This is absurd." "You're going to let him." Mark silenced him with a raised hand. "Ryan, enough." That moment, watching Ryan shrink back into his chair, powerless, was more satisfying than I could have imagined. The board voted. My plan passed unanimously. And then came the final blow. "Effective immediately," Mark announced. "Ryan Mitchell will transition out of his role as VP of Operations. Alan, as part of your agreement, you'll oversee the restructuring as interim head, while we search for permanent leadership, interim head." The position I had been denied, handed to me not as a favor, but because I had earned it beyond any argument. Ryan stormed out of the room, his face pale and tight with rage. I stayed seated, calm, composed, as if I hadn't just turned the tables completely. But inside, I was on fire. A year ago, they had dismissed me as outdated. Now I owned a piece of their company, was steering its recovery, and had replaced the very man they chose over me. I hadn't just come back. I had come back on my terms and won. In the weeks that followed, the shock began to fade, replaced by a steady rhythm of rebuilding. I spent long days at Sloan and Amp, Carter not as an employee but as a partner, working with teams who seemed both surprised and relieved to see me back. The culture had shifted since I left. People looked over their shoulders more, spoke less freely. It was a company that had been running on fear and hollow promises. I knew my job wasn't just to fix processes. It was to restore a sense of purpose. I didn't gloat. I didn't parade my victory. I worked. Quietly, methodically, like I always had. But this time, I wasn't working to climb their ladder. I was building a foundation they couldn't tear out from under me. The first time I walked past Ryan's old office, empty now, his nameplate gone, I felt not joy exactly, vindication maybe. The part of me that had been humiliated a year ago wanted to savor it, to replay that boardroom meeting over and over. But another part of me, the better part, just felt done with it. This wasn't about him anymore. It wasn't even about proving them wrong. It was about proving myself right. In quieter moments, I thought about the night I sat in my car in the parking lot, staring at the building that had chewed me up and spit me out. I remembered the shame, the anger, the hollow feeling of being discarded like I no longer mattered. And I thought about the months that followed, the nights I doubted myself, the mornings I wanted to give up, the countless hours I spent rebuilding from nothing. That was what defined me, not the betrayal, not the boardroom victory, but the decision I made in my lowest moment, to fight for myself. I didn't just claw my way back. I built something bigger than a title, bigger than a paycheck. I built a business that gave me purpose, that gave others opportunities, and ultimately allowed me to return to the very place that had rejected me. Not as an employee desperate for validation, but as a partner whose value was undeniable. It taught me something I wish I had learned years ago. Your worth isn't defined by who promotes you or who overlooks you. It's defined by what you build when no one else believes in you. Age, I realized, wasn't my obstacle. It was my advantage. Experience gave me the wisdom to navigate crises, the resilience to endure failure, and the vision to create something new when my old world crumbled. A year ago, they told me I didn't belong in the future of this company. Now I own part of that future. And I will spend every day ensuring that no one who comes after me, no one with years of quiet dedication and hard-won knowledge, is ever made to feel disposable. Because if my journey taught me anything, it's this: you are never too old, too outdated, or too small to rewrite your own story. And when you do it with patience, strategy, and unwavering self-respect, the people who once underestimated you will eventually have no choice but to stand beside you, on equal ground, as partners.